Hi, Misha here, and kind of made the mistake of looking at an old video we did right before we went to microphones and whatnot. Covered the Austro-Hungarian, later Austrian and Hungarian, Steyr Mannlicher M1895. This is the long infantry rifle, if you couldn't tell. The repeater. And we looked at the carbine or cavalry carbine or Stetson short rifle variant. Been kind of wanting to revisit these, and did do a video much more recently on this critter here. This is a Yugoslavian reworked M95, known as an M9524 or M95M. This is one that Yugoslavia rebarreled with a Mauser barrel, so I could fire 8x57 Mauser, a rimless round. So that video is pretty modern and really for this one. But these two older ones, which are both an 8x56, originally 8x50 rimmed, probably worth revisiting, especially since I picked up this one. Now this might not look like much, just an old beat up rifle, really. Very long, very 19th century old school. But it's actually one I've been meaning to get for several years. This is a Steyr Mannlicher model, 1888-90. And this was the Austro-Hungarians' first smokeless powder, or rather semi-smokeless powder rifle, and the first one to fire a small diameter bullet. So it's an interesting history. Now this is a straight pull. Helps if I take the safety off. It's got its Carbine in it. And it is still magazine fed, in block clip, packet, Mannlicher. But it's a different system, different bolt style than this here, which is straight pull. And I thought we would just talk about the differences and kind of the history a wee bit, and make up for the old and pretty gross and horrifying video. But we leave it up because we're honest like that. So, the 1888. This was designed by Ferdinand von Mannlicher, a man with an impressive resume and an impressively cool name. And it was based on his earlier work that dated back to 1884. He first designed the 1885 model, the 1886 model. These fired an 11mm black powder cartridge. They did feed from an on-block clip system, or his first. But the Austrians really wanted to get to a modern cartridge, but having just adopted the 1886, and then when they went to the 1888, they decided to go, okay, we're going to jump forward, we're going to get to this new small diameter thing. But by that point, the Lebel was out, the gears were already turning, so they were stuck with an 8mm black powder round. But they did have a pretty advanced 5-shot clip system. Straight pull bolt, uses a falling wedge. And then in 1890, they went to a new cartridge. Originally this was 8x52 rimmed. They went to a new 8x50 rimmed, and the 8890, as it became known, would fire a, quote, semi-smokeless powder round. The powder was compressed in a certain way, and it was really kind of in between. And really all they had to do for that was recalibrate the sights. You'll notice these plates on the side for the rear sight. That was for the new cartridge. And a few other minor things. So what do we have here? Well, it's quite a heavy gun. It's about 9.5 pounds, pretty stocky. Has a barrel right at about 30 inches, just a hair over. Overall length of 50 inches. Otherwise pretty conventional for that era. We have a bayonet lug on the side, and we have a stacking rod here, no cleaning rod. Pretty open top on the barrel, again very LaBelle style. One thing you'll notice, the cocking handle, while it's got a big ball, is pretty short, pretty tucked in there. But it already has a safety, very similar to the later ones. That slides in. Cocking piece there, although you can't recock it, it just sticks out. There. Bottom mounted sling swivels. Now they did try to make a carbine version. It didn't go well. It ended up turning into the model 1890 carbine, which was a different system than this, although it was still a Mannlicher. This gun was already on the way out even when they updated it for the newer cartridge. They would produce just under 1.1 million though. So they would use them. They had them, they used them, they would see service all the way through World War I, even in second line service, World War II. And a few would even be used by Israel, who would use any gun they could get. They would attempt to keep these up to date with the 8895, firing the 8x50 rimmed, loaded with smokeless powder. But this wedge system wasn't especially strong, and so it didn't do great. It didn't so much break, but it lost accuracy, and it just got really sloppy because of the pressure. The crazy one is there's even a 8824 that was redone for 8mm Mauser, which I'm really hoping is just a joke. Because, well, maybe this could fire the original 8x50 rimmed smokeless. I would not fire 8mm Mauser. Now the 95 here was a direct result of experiences with the 1890 carbine. In 1892, 1893, they worked with the new cartridge, 8x50 rimmed, smokeless powder. They also worked with the new bolt system. Instead of having a falling wedge in the back of the bolt, it had rotating lugs at the front. Much stronger and more consistent, better extraction. All around better. They also improved the Mannlicher in-block system. And so they took the carbine, they made it into a rifle. Boom, they adopted it in 1895. It went into production the next year at Steyr in Austria, and then in 1897 at what we know today as FEG in Hungary. This too has an overall length of about 50 inches and a barrel of just over 30, but it is quite a bit lighter. It's under 8.5 pounds. Very good for infantry. And these would be the standard issue long arm during World War I. They would continue to make new receivers up till the end of the war in 1918, and they would continue to assemble guns from existing parts into 1919 and 1920, so right after the war. These were mostly used by the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but in 1903, Bulgaria purchased its first M95 Mannlichers and would continue to purchase them in quite large numbers, and Bulgaria would very much use them through the World War II period. Now, you don't see a lot of long rifles today. See a lot of short rifles or carbines. They first started manufacturing a carbine in 1897, and they originally would do two versions that were extremely similar. Both had an overall length of under 40 inches, and both had a barrel of just at 20 inches. So very much, it's wood, it's fine. Very much either a long carbine or a short rifle. Also, they were quite light and handy at under 7 pounds. Still firing the same 8x50 rimmed originally. The cavalry carbine would have these side sling mounts. The Stutzen short rifle, whatever, would have bottom sling mounts. Now originally the cavalry carbine would not have a bayonet lug, but the Stutzen would, and then sometime between 1913 and 1916 the cavalry carbine and Stutzen would basically be merged, and they'd start putting the Stutzen type end cap on these. Now the ones we mostly see in America are actually products of the post-war. You'll notice this one has an S on the top. That's for Spitzer. This is technically an M95 30. That was done after the split of Austria-Hungary, and that was done by Steyr in Austria. That was rechambered for 8x56 rimmed. A Spitzer round, more powerful, still rimmed though. And during this, while they would convert some long rifles for use by the government to fire the new round, most would be cut down to carbines or short rifles. And this is where you'll see a huge, let me pick this up again, number of sling arrangements. One thing too, notice on the rifle how the front sight is on a band on the barrel. Most of your cut downs will have that. Original short guns, even if they were reworked like this one, will have the front sight right on the barrel. This one just has the cavalry side swivels. Some will have the moving front swivel and the moving rear, plus a bottom swivel and a bottom swivel. Some will have a fixed swivel here and a bottom swivel, or a fixed swivel and no bottom swivel. Most of the reworks though do have this side swivel. That seemed to be a standard, although sometimes it's removed or plugged and a bottom swivel's in its place. So yeah, you see a lot of things, and the line between cavalry carbine and Stutzen is pretty much blurred to the point of not being able to recognize it. So yeah, in Austria, they would mark these with an S for the rechamber. Here's the round. It's partial box here. Missing its outer sleeve, but you get the idea. They're old. M-block clip. These are the 8x56, the Spitzer, if you couldn't tell, pointed. Now one thing to know about the Mannlicher style clip versus the later Carcano, there's only one way you can stick this in. Won't go in this way, has to go in this way. Later designs, like I said, Carcanos would make them multi-directional. Now Hungary would do much the same thing. They had a ton of M95s. They would rechamber those for the Spitzer round, and they would cut most rifles down to carbines. They would mark theirs with an H. This one's at least a Budapest gun, you can see. And H basically stood for pointy in Hungarian. And these would be known as either M95 31 or more properly 31M. But whereas Steyr would convert these all throughout the 30s and into 1940 and issue them to second line troops quite a bit, also sending a lot to Bulgaria, Hungary would only do them until 1935, at which time they would stop and put them in storage because they introduced their new 35M rifle. But that's a story for another video. So there is kind of the where we're at with these very interesting straight pull critters. So we'll move on from there. So one reason I wanted an 8890 was the different bolt system. The release is here. Now this one is very Cosmally, so forgive me, and it's going to spring forward when I pull it out. So yeah, that's just how straight pulls are. Here's this one. Notice the front is just a front. The locking surface is this wedge down here. That's down, that locks in, cocked in. That's how it locked. So on the bottom, one massive lug. So that's kind of mechanically interesting to me. I like mechanically different things. And here is the more standard version. It always starts off really stiff. I don't know why. Why do you start off stiff? If I remember how these come out. You can tell this isn't a gun I take apart much. Yes, I remember. Damn it. Okay, guys, don't laugh at me too much. I knew it was the trigger, but I forgot. Push the trigger forward. Sorry. I haven't done this in a while. Like, I know it's trigger, but I'm used to Carcanos. So this is a bolt system. It locks, rotates. You don't want to get caught when it does that, trust me. It's a very stiff spring. This one's very greasy. But yeah, here are the two systems. Wedge. You can probably appreciate why one is better than the other. And if your cameraman's not being an idiot, it's also much easier to take out. The only downside to these, the bolts are pretty much hand fitted. They weren't GI part type things. And that was kind of the downfall of the gun. It actually worked really well in the trenches, believe it or not. And while straight pulls don't have the best primary extraction, this one was pretty good, pretty durable. It did better than most. But the thing is, the hand fitted parts, and when these were rebuilt in the 30s, just sometimes they didn't get built right, or they didn't have the same hand fitting. So a lot of the ones we get today are a little rougher than originally they would have been. I think they're kind of neat though. I've always had a soft spot for them. Now, even though it was basically Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and a few others before the war, after the war, because Austria-Hungary was on the losing side, a lot of these were paid out as reparations to different nations, and that spread them throughout Europe all throughout the 20s. They turned up pretty much everywhere, including the very young Yugoslavia, which is where this came from. Yugoslavia was given quite a few. Unfortunately, they did not have 8x56. Their standard was 8x57. Here's one of those fixed swivels I was talking about. So they took Mauser M24 barrels, which are 24 inches, not 20 or 30, and they plugged them in. So you have Mauser style sights. Standard type rod still though, hardware. They also plugged the magazine, because these are no longer on block Mannlicher clip fed. Instead, they are fed by Mauser stripper clips. That means it went from being a rimmed round to a rimless round, meaning the bolt is quite different, as is the extractor. So pretty big rework, honestly. And that's pretty neat for a collector. Hey, this shoots a common cartridge, and the gun is actually strong enough to fire 8x57. The problem is these extractors and a few of their proprietary parts haven't been made in a long time. Another fun thing, they use a stand-in clip in here to help with the feed system. So while you might want to shoot one of these, you need to consider that an extractor is a pretty high wear part on a straight pull gun, and if you break one of these, you're kind of up the creek. Nevertheless, from a collecting standpoint, they're pretty neat, and these were actually used against the Nazis when they started going to Yugoslavia at the beginning of World War II. Like I said, they're also known as the M95 M. And yeah, well, one of the variants that were kind of created out there, and it's a neat one. It's really a short rifle because of the barrel length, but done a full video on it. One thing, these are often attributed to Zastava, and while they made the barrels, they didn't actually do the conversion work because they were too busy, so they were subcontracted out. Well, we'll come back in a minute with some final thoughts. Hi, all right, got these bolts back in. They're not that bad if you stand them vertically. You just pop them in, but every time I try it on camera, especially horizontally, best case it doesn't go in, worst case my finger's red. But anyway, you know, today a straight pull is a novelty. But in the 1880s, 1890s, they didn't really know which way they were going. The Mauser 98 wasn't out yet, which was kind of the definitive turn bolt. The infield was kind of old school tech. It had the lugs in the rear. It was an idea. And think about it. With the turn bolt, you have to go up, back, forward, and down. With the straight pull, it's just two motions. In fact, these were kind of nicknamed lightning fast or flash lightning by the Austro-Hungarian troops because they were quite quick, especially with the in-block packet system. You just, when you were done with a clip that would fall out the bottom, you just stuff a new one in and go. You couldn't top them off. The extractor and the way it was designed really wouldn't allow that, at least not well. You'd put undue wear on your parts, but if you needed to, you could eject your existing clip, so you know, you could empty it very quickly. They had a lot of advantages. This little carbine is extremely light and svelte, and even the long rifle here, yeah, it's long, but it's very thin and very decent ergonomics. Got a semi-pistol grip, perfectly decent safety. They can be engaged with the bolt cocked or uncocked. If you have a misfire, you can recock it and try again, at least on the 95, not on the 88. The sights were your typical sights for that day. The rifles were out to about just under 2,000 meters, like 1950, and the carbines were at 1,800, so pretty typical, like I said. The bayonets were also pretty typical. One nice thing, the 95 does have a full-length upper handguard. Something you didn't find on all the rifles back then. And a lot of these were issued with sight protectors, although they were lost along the way. And because of these being given away as war reparations after World War I, they really did spread throughout Europe and even into Africa, Asia, and probably their last major use was in 1948, 1949, during the Arab-Israeli wars. It's always been a favorite of mine since these started to come in en masse, and at one time they were very inexpensive, even today, for as much history is behind them. They're just a few $100, but the one limiting factor is, again, the cartridge here, that it's its own little proprietary cartridge. And fair warning, at least out of the Stutzens, the carbines, it does have a bit of kick to it, but it's kind of a fun kick. Well, like I said, I looked at our older video on this and it made me cringe, so having the new edition, the very old new addition to the collection, I thought what better time to revisit. It's funny, the guy I got this from thought nothing of it, and I've been looking for one of these and this popped up locally. He just saw its condition, and I think it's in good shape for as old and as much action as it's seen. I mean, it hasn't been sporterized, hasn't been refinished. It's just an old patinaed metal, beat up wood condition. So the only thing really broken on it is the spring for the rear sight. There's supposed to be a spring in between these. It's gone. Funny thing is the sight stays where it needs to be otherwise, but one day I'll put a spring in there. But otherwise, the bolt actually looks pretty good. The magazine works fine. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you'd like to know more about the 95M, the 9524, check out that video. It's not so old that it's cringeworthy. So yeah, if you own a Steyr M95, we'd love to hear about it below, and any other experiences you might have. And we will be getting to the Hungarian guns like the 35M and so on and so forth eventually. So if you could, like, share, and subscribe, and if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. This is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon next time.